Hello, I'm Mary Nightingale. Welcome to the latest podcast from Piper, the specialist investor in consumer-branded businesses. Piper's spent more than 30 years funding and helping more than 30 founders and entrepreneurs to grow successful brands. It believes there are 3 critical stages of growth in a business, which it calls 7-17-70. Now, these numbers relate to key points in a brand's growth cycle where there has to be a step change. It could be growth in turnover, £7 million, 17 million and £70 million, or indeed by building the number of sites from 7 through 17 to 70. In these podcasts, I'm going to be talking to some of the UK's most dynamic founders and entrepreneurs about the secrets of their success and how to dodge the pitfalls along that 7-17-70 journey. And today I am with Nicola Elliott, co-founder, along with business partner Oliver Manel, of the beauty and wellbeing brand Neom Organics. Welcome, Nicola.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in terms of the 7-17-70 journey that we're talking about here, as I understand it, you're en route, aren't you? It's somewhere between 7 and 17.
We are,
right?
yes, and definitely feeling the change in pace. I think Piper are right about that. It feels like we are ramping things up in a phenomenal way.
Talk about yourself and your early career. I mean, did you always dream of being an entrepreneur?
Well, I actually have had 2 careers, and this is the second. So I was a magazine journalist for the first 10 years, and actually that's what I always dreamt of. I was kind of good at 2 things at school, writing and art, and that was kind of it. But I was really quite good at those 2 things. So from an early age, I always thought, I would be a journalist, and magazines were kind of the part of journalism that really sort of held, the most, this glossy kind of allure for me. And so that's what I always wanted to do. And actually, as I went through university, I did 9 placements at magazines because it was so tough to get into. But that stood me in good stead. And as soon as I finished, I managed to get a job with the contacts that I had. And I worked my way up. And then I worked at Heat, and I worked at Marie Claire, and I worked at Glamour, and I worked my way up there. So that was my first career. And there was always an itching of something. My dad was an entrepreneur. I mean, he sold cars in Yorkshire. It was hardly, what I do. It's a world away from it. But there was a sense of you can do this, and a sense of ownership, I think, of about being an entrepreneur that always appealed to me. And Oliver had the same thing with his dad. His dad and my dad are best friends. And then sort of this world that I had really cracked, but had got pretty far, I was associate editor, so it's kind of number 2. I'd got
of Glamour
magazine, and that was a top-selling magazine at the time. So I'd kind of cracked that code a bit, and I thought, actually, these skills that I've learned from the magazine, how could I take those and make those my own? And then, you overlay the passions that you have at that time. And for me, that was wellbeing. And that became sort of the cocktail of events that led me to starting Neom.
So what the picture I'm getting of is someone, whatever you were doing, you did it with commitment. You're a kind of driven person. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely the way that I was brought up. You do it properly or you don't do it at all. And it stands you in good stead, I think,
Yeah. Tell me about your dad a little bit. I mean, he sounds quite an interesting character.
Yeah, he's kind of amazing. I suppose I am a kind of a daddy's girl. He came from nothing, He didn't have the money to go to university, left school at 15, bought and sold cars. My childhood was going around car auctions, and buying a car and taking it home and then sitting in the garage whilst it was painted up, and you'd get a Kit Kat at the end of the day if you'd been good, So that's sort of how I was brought up. And, and he's a hard worker and a bright guy, a smart guy, but not overly educated. As I said, didn't do A-levels, didn't go to university. And so I think there was a real emphasis on work ethic because that's how you could kind of make up that deficit. Of course, that was the core of how I was brought up. And Oliver, the same.
Did your parents encourage you to go to university? Was there ever a question of you not doing that and just getting straight into the workplace?
It would have been fine had I have come home and said, actually, I'm going to set up a clothes shop. That's actually what he wanted for me as I was a child. He always had this dream that me and my sister would open a women's clothes shop. That was suitably ambitious. in Leeds. That's where I'm from. I think that was something that, you know, he really believed in, was working for yourself, and therefore, however big you wanted a business to be, or if you wanted to work 3 days, you wanted to, you know, the people that you wanted to work with, the culture you wanted to create, having that sense of kind of autonomy about your own life and that control over it. He always, you know, was singing the virtues of that lifestyle. So when I started Neom, the day before I decided to make the switch, I actually got offered the job as an editor-in-chief for a magazine which is, as they all have since folded, but for Northern and Shell. And I remember it was twice the salary that I was on. They actually showed me around the offices. And I rang him from the taxi, the first person I rang, and said, "Oh, they've offered me this job, and, you know, guess what the salary is, la la la." And there was just silence. And I thought, "Are you not happy about that?" And he said, "I just think if you take this job, that's your path then. You're working for somebody else, doing this forever, and there's a big decision to make." And, you know, I didn't take the job, and I ended up starting Neom, and Oliver hadn't left by then, so it was literally me in a broom cupboard.
And a real leap of faith to go with this idea you've had. So talk to me about the birth of that Neom idea. Where did that actually come from? How did it get formed?
I think there was certainly a period of a year or two where there was a fusing of all these things that happened in my life. So I was working as a journalist, and I was really crazy busy, and because I did entertainment and covers, I would spend an awful lot of time, you know, with New York and LA. So my British day would sort of finish at 3, and then we'd start with New York, and then after that we'd start with LA, and that was fine because I was 26 and I didn't have to get home to any children. But, you know, I was pretty shattered, and it got me to a point where I started with awful anxiety. And I remember looking around and thinking, "Oh my God, this is kind of a bit of a modern malaise." And it kick-started for me my own wellbeing journey. I went and trained as a nutritionist and as an aromatherapist.
While working at the magazines?
Yes,
Well, how did you fit that in, for goodness sake?
Well, I mean, I think I was younger. I had a bit more time, you know, an odd hour here. I had a passion for it and interest. I think you always make time for the things you're interested in, don't you?
Yeah, I guess so.
And I was genuinely interested in that, and it you know, made me feel better. It was kind of a bit of a light bulb stage, not moment, where I started realising actually the oils that I blended could have a great effect on my mood and my stress levels, and the food I ate and the way I exercised. So there was a period towards the end of the Glamour days, Glamour magazine, that is, where I kind of really got into wellbeing. During that time, Oliver, my business partner, who is 3 years younger than me, was coming down and doing work experience and sleeping on my couch, and we became quite friendly. And I used to take him to celebrity parties for the magazine, and he'd go, "Oh my God, your life's amazing. It's so fun and interesting and glamorous." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm living off the canapes because I've got no money." And meanwhile, he was, you know, had this great salary in private equity. Yeah. Working for a Japanese bank, and so there was something there percolating at the same time. My sister was working for Friends of the Earth. She was an absolute staunch greenie, but what she said to me about natural products and natural ingredients, and, you know, the amount of chemicals that we were using on our body and using, you know, absorbing through the skin, which was the largest organ, that was also percolating. She was absolutely kind of that beacon of living a natural and organic lifestyle for me. And then, of course, you know, I got to this point, as I said before, where it was sort of that T-junction for me in my own career, and there was this sort of entrepreneurial, you know, thing in me, you know, all the way through. So I think those sort of 4 strands came to a head at one time, and Oliver and I had the idea to set up Neom, and it was, you know, it was always about a wellbeing brand. We always had this sort of vision we could kind of inspire people to lead naturally healthy lives. That was always our thought and our vision and our mantra, and we would do it through my oils. And at that point, I was blending oils for different purposes all the time. My husband is a sports teacher, and I used to blend oils for him when he came back from playing football. He'd been out playing football all day, and he'd come back and be, "Oh, I can't move. And I'd be like, well, it's Saturday night, you have to move, you have to get up, we have to go partying or whatever. Something very important you've got to move
nightmare to be married
for.
to.
Exactly. Well, he was my boyfriend then. And I developed this little tincture for him, which we still sell now. And he was like, oh, my God, this stuff's amazing. It's magic. I just feel, it's like my legs feel totally new and I feel kind of, ready to go. And I remember at one point sort of, creating 31 of these little bottles that he took off to the boys.
To inhale or rub on your skin?
To put in the bath. We did it through a bath oil. So I was kind of, having this sort of semi-success, if you like, in developing these oils that really worked. And so...
Were you selling them at this point?
No, we weren't selling them. And so I said to Oliver, I think I could make something out of these. I think they're pretty good. And I know a little bit about the zeitgeist because I'm working in magazines, and we can make these a whole lot cooler and more effective and beautiful and smell amazing than anything that's out there, in a health food shop that smells a bit funny and you've got to blend it yourself, and it means going through the doors of quite a crusty store. We can really turn this round and make it easy for people to use and smell beautiful and still be 100% natural and tell the story about natural products, because people don't know it. They're just using synthetic, products and candles and whatever else. So that was sort of the start of the light bulb year.
But did it feel like a light bulb moment? I mean, talking about it now, of course, it makes perfect sense. It seems entirely logical and inevitable that it would be a success. But how much did it feel like that at the time?
There's sort of two answers to that question. I think in one regard, we always were confident that it would get to where it is today, because we started off with a very steely determination of where we were going to go. We didn't start and say, oh, let's see if this works. We had good careers that we left. So there was a real confidence there from day one, and there was a clear vision as to where we were going to go with the brand. And I think you have to have that vision if you want to get there, that is. I mean, some people want to start a business from a kitchen table and see where it takes them. We didn't want that. We wanted that clarity of where we were going early on. So that's one answer. But then on the other side of things, we were fortunate enough that we didn't have children. We were, in our 20s. And I suppose that we had a skill set to a degree. I knew that I could have rung any of my old editors back and got a job had it have gone wrong.
It was quite unusual to embark with a partner right from the beginning, isn't it? Why did you feel that was so important?
The need to have him. Well,
yes.
he can add up, you see, and I couldn't. I knew what my weaknesses were. What you really need is somebody who absolutely brings something to the table that either you can't do or maybe not can't, but can do that better than you.
So you complement each other.
And we complement each other, exactly. So I mean, he was he knew about building businesses, and he is no joke. He was good at maths, and he was proficient in that area of the business, which was clearly, absolutely fundamental. And I think I knew more of the sort of the creative side of the business and the products and the marketing. And I'd spent a long time sort of touching and feeling those women and knowing what kind of turned them on, whether it was through a product or a cover line or a celebrity or something. So that's sort of what I brought to the table, and he brought something different. And so I felt we would be a lot stronger, the two of us together. And, we can't let anything fester. Even with a husband, you can let something fester for a day or two because sometimes you just have to, or you're in a bit of a mood with them. You can't with a business partner. You have to pull him into a room and tell him, what he's done to annoy you, or vice versa, and get over it, because you can't afford to have a day of, any sort of bad feeling between you. You have to work together every hour.
What do you think? What do you think annoys him about you?
Oh, he would say that I always think I'm right, but then I would say the same thing about him. Because it's hard being an entrepreneur, because so much of it has to come from the gut, You can sit around and theorise all day long and say, well, this brand did it this way and this brand did it that way, and there's evidence to show that, this has worked. But ultimately, no one has the blueprint for your brand, in your category, in your market, in your territory, right now, in this year. That doesn't exist. So you can take all of the evidence and everyone's opinions, but ultimately there's a big dollop of gut feeling in it. And so that's difficult because there's no right, is there? It's just about who can persuade the other that their argument is righter.
OK, so let's talk about the product then. What was the first product that you actually launched with?
Well, we launched with candles, and we launched with candles because we always, as I said before, we always wanted this wellbeing brand which would transcend across sleep and helping you de-stress and lifting your energy and boosting your mood. And we would do that through various different products, bath oils and lotions and candles and diffusers and the whole 9 yards. But the reality is that we just couldn't afford to buy all that product to invest in that stock. And we managed to scrabble £15,000 together between the two of us. Oliver had won a game show totally randomly. I mean, bizarre.
He won a game show?
He won a game show. Something that ITV put on with Vernon Kay. He'll kill me for saying this. Anyway, he won the game show and he won £8,000 or something. So brilliant. That was his money. And I had a car that I'd been bought for my 21st, which was, by now 7 years old. So that had kind of, depreciated quite a bit. But anyway, that could be sold. And between these two random pots, we would scrabble together £15,000 and we had to buy what we had to buy with that. And actually, we decided that we would start with candles because at that point, 98% of the candle market was being made with paraffin wax and synthetic fragrances, and actually it's barely changed since. And so I really felt that that needed changing. All the products that we could offer, those candles that were burning in everyone's home, made of paraffin wax with a synthetic fragrance and the black soot and the chemicals, being released. That was a story that we could take, and it was quite tightly packed up in that product, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. The journalist in you is coming out here because it's a story.
Totally.
You're talking about a story that you could pursue.
Yeah. And listen, consumers they're not fickle, so you can't make something up or spin it or do like you might do in a magazine. 3 people are wearing purple, it's a trend. You can't do that. There's got to be an awful lot more depth to that story, for sure. But there's definitely ways in which you can present it. And I felt like we could really present the story around the candle in the strongest way compared to the other products that were out there. So we put all our money on that. And
in stock, basically.
In stock, exactly. And we just had enough. I had a 2-bedroom flat. We asked my flatmate to leave and we could make the second bedroom into a stock room. So the stock all arrived. Oliver and my husband, unloaded it all, put it in the second bedroom, which was, 8 by 8.
How many
London
candles
flat.
was this, probably?
Oh, I've £15,000 worth, so at cost
That's a lot
price.
of candles.
I tell you what, it was enough. If the room was 8 by 8, there was a small gap in the middle where someone could go and pick the stock out, and the someone was only me because Oliver and my husband Dave were too big to fit through the gap. So that's how many candles I can quantify we had.
And with how many fragrances?
And we had them in 4 fragrances. And the roadside smelt amazing. Absolutely amazing.
You're listening to the Piper podcast with me, Mary Nightingale. I'm talking to Nicola Elliott, co-founder of the beauty and wellbeing brand Neom Organics. Talk to me about the path it took then from going from those very small beginnings, albeit very confident, and you knew where you were going and so on. What about the route from there to actually being a successful business, to a £7 million business? If we're going in terms of the 7/17/70, when did you know you were on to a success?
Oh, I don't know if you even know that now.
Really don't?
No, I think you... Obviously, there's confidence and that builds and it ebbs and flows through the journey. But I think, there's something, there's a restlessness, something that spurns you on every day, and those moments of, oh my God, is somebody else coming into the marketplace or doing it better, or are we moving fast enough, or these next 3 products that we've got coming out, are they good enough? Do they need changing? Is that marketing campaign really right? And I'll rip it up and we'll start again, or we'll change the direction or whatever. But in answer to your question, I think you generally start a brand and there's kind of a flurry because it's new and it's exciting and you've got your own energy to put into it and it's your new baby. And then a bit like the second album, in the music world, it's harder to do the second album, the second kind of wave of product launch, because it has to be as good but it also has to build on the story that you've got.
Take me back to that, you've got your back room packed full of candles and you can just slide your way through to reach your stock.
Yeah.
Talk about the journey from there to actually having a warehouse, to having lots of outlets and so on. How did you become a tiny business to not so tiny business?
Well, it really is step by step. I think what's difficult is to really break it down into even 7, if you're talking about 7 million, into 7 chunks, because it honestly is far many more chunks than that, and I think it is brick by brick by brick, or that's the way we've built it. But early days, we had Selfridges on board. That was probably quite a mark in the calendar, because once we had a decent stockist on board, that obviously sort of was a green light, I suppose, for others, and not just big stockists, but whether it would be a local store or a spa or whatever. So I also prioritised in those early years the PR. I understood how to run PR because of my magazine days, so I knew that I could get a decent PR, and I knew the importance of good PR. So it was probably a funny thing for a business to really prioritise in those early years, but we did do that, and that brought with it some really nice stories that we then helped leverage some of the pitches that we were making. So Kylie Minogue, for example, ordered a whole load of our candles to use backstage on her tour, and it was just after she'd recovered from breast cancer, so she was very into natural products, and so that was fantastic, and we got some press on that, and that was early days. And then we went to the trade shows. We did the trade shows. Those were in the days where we just wanted to show shops and spas what we had, and that was important for us, and we stopped doing that at about sort of 4 million, because more people wanted to open with us, and we just didn't have the space. We have to be quite exclusive about, if you're in Chiswick, you can only have one stockist, etc., etc. So there became too many no's for it to justify being worthwhile. But in the early days, that was quite helpful, and I think definitely helped get us a decent bed of customers. And then at about the sort of 4 or 5 million stage, we managed to get John Lewis. And there's a sequencing to this for sure, because, the likes of John Lewis probably aren't going to want to do business with somebody who hasn't shown that they can operate at that level. Can you provide them with that much stock? Do you have the systems and the people, the processes in place to make that function work? And so that was great. That kind of really propelled the brand nationwide. And then came the store. I think our first store in Wimbledon probably came, when we were at the 6 million mark.
And how much of a leap of faith is it to invest in a store? Because it's big money, isn't it?
It's a huge leap of faith to put all your money on a retail store. It sounds kind of nuts, and in some ways it is. You can do some amazing things online, but I think to bring a consumer brand to life, a store plays a really important role. But it has a halo effect on many other areas of the business. We have many customers who'll say, I keep meaning to get down to the Leeds store, but I haven't. But I've seen the pictures on Facebook, and I've heard about the events on Instagram, and my friend Jane's gone down. And the halo effect of that means that actually she buys online. So it's sort of sewing all of those retail points together.
At some point, you decided to bring in outside investment. So that is the next stage, if you like. And talk to me about how that came about and why you felt you needed that and what that brought.
I think we're a sort of unique case study where this is concerned, because predominantly, I think you would probably find that a brand goes for funding when they need funding, right? That kind of makes sense. And we didn't need the funding, really. We were profitable. We'd worked hard to keep it entirely for ourselves.
So you'd sort of grown organically?
We'd grown organically.
You'd had borrowings along the way?
Well, no, we had. We sold a very, very small stake in sort of year 3, 4. But that was because the guy that we sold it to, we really felt he could help bring value with his expertise. So it wasn't even really for cash at that stage. But I think where we came to personally was a bit of a crossroads, where we'd been approached an awful lot by trade and interested parties to buy the brand. And we thought, we're sort of 37, 38. We're going to do something. We're not going to lie on a beach. It doesn't feel like the right time to retire. The brand has absolutely got traction now, and it's becoming, the phone is ringing for us. And we really believed that we could take it to the next stage, and that would be even more exciting. So So we decided that we wanted to stick with it. But if we were going to do that, we were really going to sort of put our foot to the gas and push on. And by now, wellbeing is becoming a big trend. So we really wanted to sort of ride that wave. Then we would get some funding. So it wasn't a need; it was a want. And I think that's really why we chose Piper, because we liked them and we felt that they could really add value. We met with a couple of people, and Ollie an awful lot more than me. That's his world. They just felt really, I don't know, too financy,
too corporate,
too in the numbers. No mention of the brand. Didn't feel like when we had the meeting, I said to Ollie, they may be of use to you, but it doesn't feel like they're of any use to me on my side of the business, on the brand. And I don't want that kind of pressure on my head when we don't need it. Let's be quite clear about why we need this. We want somebody to help us, and we want to enjoy this part of the journey as well. We want to absolutely know that we can treble the business. We want to do it with people that we feel will add that value, but we also want to enjoy it. And we're in a position where we're lucky enough to be able to say those are 3 non-negotiable points. And so Piper were the only people that fell into that category.
Is it different having an investor involved to this extent?
Yes.
What has been unexpected? What is as you expected? Describe the difference to your business of having someone else on board.
It's a step change, and a fundamental step change. And that was part of the reason why we wanted it as well. I think, doing 12 years of something, even though it's of course evolved, you feel the need to do something new every once in a while, and so that was really important, that we kind of entered into a new phase of our lives personally, and it's certainly done that. But as positive as that is, it obviously is challenging in many ways as well. I'm used to knowing everything, I have the answers by and large, and then suddenly you're working, there's another 6 people in the room who know more than you, have done it more times than you, and you go from being the teacher to being taught. That's quite a step change, but you've got to temper that, I suppose, with really remaining true to your own gut about the brand. Like I said, nobody has the answer. There isn't a handbook, so you're speaking to some incredibly smart people who've trodden that path before, and you have to take all of that advice, and then you also have to sort of overlay it with what you think. It's great fun working with really smart people. I really, really enjoy that. Because, when you start a business in those early days, you can't afford to employ really great people who have, come with a huge amount of education on a subject. So it's been a long time coming since we can, with the Piper money and with the Piper people, build a team of brilliant individuals. And when you look around the boardroom, and we're in a process now still recruiting a couple of those really important senior people, but you look around the boardroom and you think, well, actually, we've managed to bring on an amazing marketing director, an amazing finance director, and we've got 3 brilliant people from Piper alongside Oliver and I. That's a fun place to be, and it's a nice place to be.
So here you are. You're sort of somewhere now around the 17-ish. Next step, where? Are you ambitious still? No, why am I even asking you that? You are totally driven still. Where do you see this going? You're going to 70 and beyond, or you're going international? What's the aim at this point?
Well, I think there's an awful lot more we can do in the UK. International, actually, for the next sort of 5 years of Neom is really upside to our core plan. I think it would be a shame if we don't really sort of accelerate that, because I think there's some obvious international work that we should do, but there's an awful lot more that we can do in the UK. I think the first up to the 7 point is about getting your brand kind of consolidated, your story. It's not to say that it doesn't evolve after this, but fundamentally your products, establishing you in the market, creating that bedrock. But actually to get from the 17 to the 70 is really about just turning the dial up on the right amount of people understanding and knowing that message. The stores need to, evolve in terms of, look, you learn things, you realise that, if they look a bit more this way, then and people will understand the story, etc. And you need to accelerate product development, and we've got some amazing ideas for product development over the next few years. But I think, to get ourselves from where we are now over the next 5 years, really there's an awful lot that we can do in our home market.
Have you ever had any doubts?
I'm a woman, aren't I? I have moments of being totally certain, or I'm all over the place. It's not doubt about the big story, and it's not doubt about the big brand, and it's not doubt about, the ultimate direction. But that's, unfortunately, I think, built into some of us, and I do have that. Absolutely, I do. And I think every time the business evolves and it moves on from where it is, because the graph doesn't go in a nice line, unfortunately. It sort of, is a zigzag up. Every time you take that step up, I think I have a moment where I think, oh God, can I do this? Can we do this? Is that right? I do have those moments.
And the more successful you get, the further down it is. And, it's a pretty dizzying view down there, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And also, the more opinions you have on something, and that's, that makes you question yourself. I find sometimes I'm quite jealous of Oliver. I think, there's not that many questions that you ask of the accounts or the finances, the
black and white.
That's, if we do that, that's that graph. If we do that, that's that graph. If we do that, that's that graph. Whereas I might bring out, an idea for a gift box, and everyone's opinion, including next door's cat, gets an airing, because we're all consumers, aren't we? It's too pink, it's not pink enough, it's not bright enough, it should be £30, no, it should be 32. Everyone's got an opinion, and the opinions get louder, and so that becomes challenging for me.
Have you made any mistakes? Have there been any products that you've launched that have been an absolute disaster and you've had to drop them?
Hundreds of mistakes. I mean, I'd say 9 mistakes until you get to the holy grail for everything you do, every person, every system, so many mistakes. Sometimes it's about, doing things 8 different ways till you realise, the 9th way is the way, But I only knew that because now I know that those 8 ways don't really hit the mark. So they're not mistakes as much as just not finding the holy grail.
Do you think that's the essence of being an entrepreneur, is that total refusal to take no for an answer, or to accept the small failures?
Yes, I think that's a massive part of it. So many people I speak to who might have started something and then it dwindled or it finished or whatever. And always when they tell me the reason, I think that would just be a daily problem for me. It wouldn't be a reason to stop.
I want to take you back now to pre-2005. And you were telling me that you had this crazy lifestyle as a journalist, and there was no rest, and how are you going to live your life at this sort of pace? And here you are, 15 years later.
Living a very zen lifestyle.
Not really practising what you preach, some might say. Wellbeing, you've got a couple of kids in the mix now. You've got this incredibly successful business, which you're driving on with a total commitment, telling us all to relax. How relaxed are you, Nicola Elliott? How many candles does it take to calm you down?
That's a good question. I am a real woman, and I think that's kind of the beauty of Neom in many ways, is that, I realise that it's just not possible for the majority of us to, book into a weekend spa to get that relaxation, to, wake up at 6 a.m. and have a green smoothie on the side of a mountain whilst doing yoga. So I think that's kind of my understanding that version of well-being, lovely as it is just not doable. But our message at Neom is that, the small steps can make the big difference. And actually, for the average woman, it's not a silver bullet, but, making a bath, taking that time to lock the door against the children and making those sort of 15 minutes in the bathroom, doing a little bit of mindfulness breathing. I think those small moments are very, very, very valid in our everyday lives and more realistic.
Is there anyone you look at and you think they got it right? Has there been a figure that has inspired you all the way through?
I suppose as a woman, I'm really inspired when women manage to get the balance right. When women get themselves into a place in their careers where they're doing something that they really love, have the confidence to build on that and make that into a brand. There's a passion and a truth to that, rather than doing something that, is a job first. So I'm always inspired by those people. I think that's fantastic. You manage to kind of keep your passion at the heart of your working life.
What's the worst piece of advice that you've ever been given? Because I bet people have tried to advise you.
The worst advice is always when people are adamant that it's good advice. It's great if they say, I'm giving you this advice based on this, take it or leave it. You quite often get people saying, that's the best place to open a store, or that's the thing you should do with a marketing campaign. And actually, people should give their advice, I think, with quotation marks around it. It shouldn't be so forceful, because not every piece of advice is applicable from one business to the other. And it's also useful when they say, listen, I'm giving you this advice because I've actually done this before. And in my experience, these were the areas to avoid. And it's kind of given some context. Whereas, when people give you advice and make it sound like they absolutely know that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, but they haven't really got the backup for that. It's just their gut feeling. That's really not helpful.
You have a big success in your hands now. How does it feel? How do you judge success?
An unfortunate quality of an entrepreneur is you're always looking ahead. And so you probably spend too much time in the future and less in the moment. You've constantly got your eye on the next prize. But, we do have to temper that with enjoying it, because, as I said to you before, the reason why we took this on to the next journey with Piper was about being able to enjoy that journey as well. So that's a constant challenge.
Whether by luck or judgment, you've really hit the zeitgeist with this, because this is a topic that everybody talks about now. 20 years ago, not so much, but now absolutely. It's the quality of life is something that obsesses people, doesn't it?
Well, it is the zeitgeist now, but it wasn't 12 years ago. This isn't about a trend. It was about how our lives were going to have to shift. We just hadn't become educated. That's where we were ahead of ourselves. But in those early days, if you could have sold a bath oil that smelt of, strawberry sundae, or a candle that smelt of chocolate buns, and put it in a pretty box, that would have been so much easier for us 12 years ago, whereas we were telling this story and having to educate people, and it made things in those early days much harder for us.
Is there a legacy? Do you think about legacy?
Yes, not personally, but I think the brand has a heart and a soul and a meaning, and I think that's inspiring people to lead naturally healthy lives and to do that through natural products. We're a piece in that jigsaw puzzle now of wellbeing. We are definitely in the categories, that we are seen as the number one wellbeing brand, and our passion is very much about getting people to understand that those small steps, as I said to you before, those small steps can ladder up to the big things. And I think if we can turn people on to the importance of well-being in that small way, so it's inspiring enough, but it doesn't feel daunting, that has to be powered where beauty and well-being products are concerned through natural plant oils. You cannot do that through synthetic products. That story is our education, really, is our legacy. I don't think there's a brand that puts that much energy, effort, love into a topic, because it's a big topic we're talking about. It feels that that's the right thing to do, aside from a nice thing to do, the right responsible thing to do.
Nicola Elliott, thank you very much indeed. Fascinating story.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Piper podcast, hosted by me, Mary Nightingale. Next time, I'll be talking to Aj Jaiwick-Kramer, founder of two restaurant brands, Latin American chain Las Iguanas, and more recently the Caribbean restaurant chain Turtle Bay, which he's grown to just shy of a £70 million turnover in less than 5 years. Join me then.